Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Committee for Dulles Legislative Committee meeting regarding the topic of cargo. We appreciate you taking valuable time out of your day to join us. And before I turn it over to John Boylan to introduce our guest speaker, I would invite all of you to register for the upcoming luncheon on Thursday, December 12th at the Dulles Airport Marriott. Our keynote speaker will be Richard Golanowski, MWA Vice President and Dulles Manager. You may register online at committeefordulles.org. And speaking of MWA, we were hoping to have both Jack Potter and Richard Golanowski with us today, but I understand they have a board meeting and they may not be done yet. So we do hope that they will be able to join us shortly. And depending on the time that we have at the end, we will have a Q&A after the speakers. Should you have a question, please post it in the chat room. This presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the CFD YouTube channel. Again, thank you for being here. Now I will turn the time over to John Boylan, who serves as our chair of the Legislative Committee. John, the meeting is yours, my friend.
Great. Thanks, Scott, and thanks for setting this all up. I wish I could introduce everybody because I look around, everybody's VIP. But I do want to thank our Transportation Economic Development Committee as we co-host this with Jack Vega and Anita Grazer as they help co-chair those committees. Really excited again to have Eric Juhu back with us again. He was kind of new to VEDP last time we spoke, but he's now he's there. He's old hat. Everybody knows him, and he's taking the place by storm. I don't want to take too much time away from him because, Eric, thank you for being part of it, and I know this is part of sharing with us what you found through the study. Hopefully, it's looking forward. Do we keep dating, and what's our next steps? And I know you've got a lot of that planned for us. So I'm just going to turn it over to you because you're part of the friend network here with Committee for Dulles, and we appreciate all you've done. So we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, Eric.
All right, appreciate that, John. So what I've put together is a condensed, publicly facing version of the study that we just concluded. So the study wrapped in October, and we have some economic insights and a path to success that I will go over. So let me put this in present mode and share the correct screen. And you can tell me if you can see the slides, and then we'll rock and roll. Sure. This screen, yeah. Event. Okay.
Got it.
You have full screen, not presenter.
Yep. Full screen looks great.
Perfect. All right. So agenda that I will run through is why we did the study in the first place, and then the study report and market conditions, and then highlights, impacts, next steps. So why did we do this in the first place? So I joined VEDP just over a year ago, and we have a strategic plan for the organization, and then each one of our divisions has strategic initiatives and they're as part of their overall strategy. And these are my 5 strategic initiatives for the logistics sector. So I'm the Vice President of Logistics for VEDP. I'm one of 3 core sector leaders, and the core sectors are where we believe that the majority of our jobs and capital investment in the Commonwealth are going to come from for the foreseeable future. So that's logistics, what we're calling advanced manufacturing, which is life sciences, food and beverage, and advanced materials, and then knowledge work, which is, fintech, software, cybersecurity, that kind of thing. So of those 3 sectors, we're going to see over 65% of our job growth in Virginia come from there. All the rest, we have targeted business managers, so semiconductors, automotive, that kind of thing, which is either a mature industry in Virginia or it's a focus, but it's not where we're going to see the most exponential growth. So 3 of the 5 of my strategic focus areas directly tie to air cargo, and the air cargo asset that is in the Commonwealth that can touch, global trade is in fact Dulles. So expanding the logistics ecosystem, and that's all things that make facilitating transportation and logistics through and around the Commonwealth possible. Virginia's logistics infrastructure, so that's the hard assets, whether you're talking about roadways, ports and rail, or even, you know, the extensions of that, like warehouses and that type of thing. And then lastly, to support our target sectors by leveraging logistics. So the easy one to pick on, and I'll use this example several times throughout the conversation, is the life sciences industry or pharmaceuticals, which are temp controlled, right? And if you don't have air cargo with the proper material handling capabilities to maintain temperature integrity throughout the entire chain of custody, then you really can't grow investments in the pharmaceutical space, because the supply chain won't allow for the business to operate. So 3 of my 5 strategic focus areas directly relate to air cargo and Dulles. That's why I did this. So the total opportunity is to unlock. I'm stealing a page from the Port of Virginia and the language of the gateway. And the CEO of the Port of Virginia has said to me on more than one occasion, you know, from an economic development perspective, from a market timing perspective, we have an opportunity in Virginia to decide whether we're going to be a gateway or a cul-de-sac. The message from the port certainly is clear. They definitely view themselves as America's most modern gateway from a maritime perspective. So upping the ante from a Commonwealth perspective, the Commonwealth as a whole is a gateway to the country and a gateway to the world. And the air cargo component ties directly to all of our core and targeted industries. And so we want to elevate Dulles to that same status level globally, and get cargo at the forefront, because all of our targeted industries have one or more characteristics of why air cargo is a necessary and regular component of their supply chain. Unlike retail, where it's, you know, it's an emergency, or it's fast fashion only, or it's high moving product only, or other, you know, more cost conscious manufacturing segments where air freight is an emergency switch, or it is a budget buster. In all of these industries, it's not a budget buster, it's part of the business plan. And in fact, you have to have it or you can't operate and execute successfully. So we're saying as a Commonwealth, we are going to grow in these industries. Well, these industries require robust air cargo. That's why we did the study. So digging into the market, kind of current state of affairs, and then we'll talk about sort of the catchment and service area for Dulles and some of the myths or perceptions of the cargo ecosystem. So the main takeaway here is that global demand for air cargo, despite kind of the initial dip from the pandemic and then the surge post, is still on an overall upward trend. That's all industry segments, not just e-commerce, and it's most major trades, but there is a concentration in a couple of trades of where that is coming from. Geopolitical factors are driving the double-digit growth in the Red Sea, and then of course Asia Pacific, and like everything other than China, frankly, for e-commerce. In addition to the e-commerce that you see coming out of China with Amazon and Temu. But all markets are up, and those 2 markets and specific industry segments are driving the majority of the market. So point there is the market is growing. The long-term forecast is that the air cargo industry specifically is going to half again grow over the next 15 to 20 years. And the legacy airports in the cargo triangle, 2 of the 3 of them can't really grow any further from a landing rights perspective. So that growth is going to need to go somewhere. This breaks it down a little bit further in terms of the type of capacity that's in the marketplace. So calling this out because while the demand for freighters is growing, wide body passenger, so belly cargo, which is what Dulles has abundantly to sell, has actually seen double-digit growth for the last 2 years, and now it's kind of normalized with the rest of the market of 8% growth. So while freighters are a key piece, and certainly a key piece in the e-commerce space and the integrator space, it's not the end all be all from a cargo perspective, and you don't have to have freighters to be a cargo gateway. Looking at the legacy air cargo infrastructure, with Chicago leading the way, and then New York, New Jersey, and then Dallas, Atlanta, and then us down there at the bottom. This is to show just the overall market opportunity, projected growth, and we want to change our trend line, right? When you compare investments in the cargo space that are made by the cargo community, so the airport and the cargo community as a whole, in these other spaces, the investments are substantial, and the production markets, which we'll get to in a second, in Dallas and Atlanta are similar to the market that we could serve. And yet our line is flat and we have a much smaller share of the marketplace than the other airports. So while Chicago may need to defend their top position, I see this as nothing but opportunity because we have nowhere to give it up. The thought that the catchment, we don't make anything within our catchment, I wanted to challenge that sort of philosophy a little bit. And while that may extend directly from a passenger service perspective and the immediate service area that's most conducive to passenger growth, the ecosystem and the market service area for cargo looks very different than passenger in terms of what you can capture and serve. So from a manufacturing perspective and a drive radius service perspective, we analyzed 2-hour, 4-hour, and 9-hour drive times from Dulles and the density of manufacturing. And with the exception of that one cluster in New York, our market and the Atlanta and Dallas markets are fairly similar in terms of total tons that can be captured in a 4-hour radius. So we can compete, and there is definitely a there. And if you stretch out to that 9 hours, our markets are actually bigger than those other entities. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to level up and have a robust cargo service offering just from a manufacturing capture perspective. So while we don't manufacture a whole lot in the DC metro area, we certainly make plenty in the Virginia area, and we absolutely make plenty in the service area that would benefit from expanding cargo services at Dulles. So that was everything that led into let's do the study. So then we issued an RFI, hired a consultant, and the main 3 buckets for the study that we wanted to address are: what's the total market potential? And then what do we need to do to realize that and then ultimately, what's the economic impact to the Commonwealth, which is why we're investing in this in the first place, and then the region as a whole, because that's, that service radius isn't just Virginia, it's a circle around it. So what does that look like, and do we have a competitive chance at securing it? So kind of the big answer up front is the jobs impact. So this is broken down in terms of if we were to do everything that we need to do to elevate Dulles to the position of a global cargo gateway, and prioritize cargo, what would we see from an industry impact? Where would we see job growth directly tied to that additional capability? So these are all of those industries that sit in the high or moderately high air cargo use as a regular piece of their supply chain. So over the next 10 years, we would expect about 6,500 jobs. At the majority of that in the rest of the Commonwealth, not just concentrated in Northern Virginia, in the near $2 billion range for revenues to those businesses. So significant money made by new business investment, and then that translates to about $45 million in revenue to the Commonwealth. So pretty compelling case in terms of the types of the primary mission of VEDP and the economic growth impact that we're trying to have on the Commonwealth. And then also reflecting on the, what could it have looked like if from 2019 to 2024, we looked at all of the historical projects where Virginia took a swing and we struck out, and all of the industries that are those high air cargo, and then specifically the ones that cited infrastructure as a reason why Virginia lost. And that translates to just over, 27,000 jobs that we could have had a more competitive position to secure if we had a more compelling cargo offering. So breaking that down a little bit further, the industries where that's going to come from. So it shouldn't be too much of a surprise here. This is, again, the leading industries where we're focused on growing in Virginia in the first place. And it's also all of these industries, the components are smaller and conducive to belly cargo. And that is the space that we have in abundance to sell So leaning into our ability to sell into those industries and the ecosystems that we already have present in the Commonwealth, it shouldn't be any surprise that the industry segments break down like this. I'm calling out a proactive sort of strategic push and an essential driver for our growth in the pharmaceutical space and data centers specifically. So everyone knows or should be familiar with the fact that Virginia is the data center capital of the world. We have a higher concentration of data centers in the Commonwealth than anywhere else in the world. So the internet lives here, but the guts of the internet do not. So those data centers, because of the advancements in technology, the additional demands on the data infrastructure and the processing capabilities, those facilities need to be turned over about every 3 years or so. So it is a constant supply chain it's just in constant flow, and it's all high value, it's all time sensitive, it's all fairly fragile and somewhat climate sensitive, right? So it's components that go into servers and then servers that go into server racks. One pallet's like $120 million, and you ship a whole a whole belly load worth to outfit one aisle in one data center. So the volume and the scale of this stuff is just immense. It should be no secret that there are a couple of hyperscalers with heavy investments in Virginia, one of which has a second headquarters up in the Northern Virginia area. So again, the internet lives here, but the infrastructure to make it live here does not. And there's a fantastic opportunity to leverage the space available at Dulles to lean into one of the ecosystems that already exists here and frankly protect it and allow it to sustain and make it even more competitive than it already is, by creating the third-party logistics sort of assembly and distribution model within Dulles. The other piece is the cold chain infrastructure. So about 4% of the cargo that we move is in the life sciences space, and that's with no cargo team, no sales presence, no focus on cargo at Dulles at all. Dulles is a passenger focused operation. And we move about 200,000 tons worth of cargo, and 4% of that is pharma, without even trying. And the infrastructure to facilitate that on airport is functional, but it's not like up to global distribution practice standards. So with a little bit of focus here and a little bit of investment in the short term to kind of shore up and protect what we have, and then with considerable investment for the long term, we have an opportunity to lead and capture a best-in-class service offering in Dulles and attract more investment in this industry specifically to Virginia. I would also go so far as to say, if we don't, we just simply won't. And we are focused on this industry as a Commonwealth. So this is kind of a must-do for us. We validated this information across the entire ecosystem. So one of the things that makes this study different from evaluations of this market opportunity in the past is that we didn't just turn to the economic development community, which is us, and the construction development community that builds things within airports to understand the total demand picture. We looked at the entire cargo community, from forwarders to shippers, the entities that actually control the cargo decisions, the ground handlers that are operating and transferring the cargo from the outside into the fence and then off to the airlines themselves, and then dug deep with the airlines as well to understand that revenue picture and how important cargo is to their operations and their asset decisions. So we feel like we took a complete picture of the industry as a whole, and then we went deep at Dulles specifically. And then we looked at the global standards as well from around the world, and had global airports that have kind of already walked this path and are now regarded as standards in various industries, collaborate and corroborate these insights. And several of them I have met personally, the heads of cargo, very recently at the TIACA conference, and all are willing and eager to help us achieve what is laid out in this study. So the air cargo community validated and is supportive and excited about the possibilities here. So a little bit more that we learned about our cargo mix. So this shouldn't be any surprise, but this was validating in that, global trade, there's an imbalance. The majority of the flights that come into the US from overseas markets don't reach beyond their immediate service areas. So if something's coming in, from Asia and it's destined for America's heartland, it's only going from its origin airport immediate catchment to Chicago, and that's it. And those flights are full. And so everything that's destined to the immediate Dulles service area on the import side is coming on direct flights in, and we're not really losing that to any other airports, or we're not having to route it over other airports. We actually gain on the import side. We serve additional markets beyond our own. And it's the opposite picture on the export side. And the reason it's the opposite picture on the export side is A, the trade imbalance, and then B, the markets where freighter service is regular on those same large lanes. Same thing, same situation, and there's no passenger revenue to pay for the flight back. It's just a cargo flight. So while it might be full into Chicago or JFK, and it's coming from a small service area at origin, to attempt to fill it on the way back out, it's reaching well beyond its local catchment. It's pulling cargo in from Dallas all the way up to JFK. That's not outside of the realm of possibilities. And so we lose on the export side to those markets because of the economics of building a consolidation, right? If you have to stop at Dulles and at JFK and you have a truck of main deck freight and belly freight, why would you waste the money on the extra stop when you can just send it all up north and put it on the flight out? So this was kind of the conundrum from my career in the past of like, okay, I understand that's true, but how do we change that? And so part of it is just leaning into where we have really strong connectivity and we're not retaining all of our exports. Some of this is simple as just raising awareness, having a focus and promoting it. And the rest of it is getting a little bit more creative in terms of having a better product to sell. But the opportunities to focus certainly are UK, certain places in Asia, and then what's not on this slide where we are the best connected of all airports out of the US is the Middle East and Africa. So kind of playing to our strengths, low-hanging fruit, and filling the bellies of these planes is an easy sort of first step before we lean into some investments that'll help us grow more long term. Another breakdown in terms of the product mix in the surrounding area. So the medical devices and the pharmaceuticals and then defense, this is where our mix and our service destinations kind of overlap, where we have a decent concentration of industry to begin with. So this is our foundation that we lean into. So thankfully, pharmaceuticals is an area of focus for VEDP. It's also one of the places where the study revealed that we should target. So we're definitely on something there. We also are not starting from scratch in terms of what makes an airport a successful cargo airport. So we have space to sell. So we actually don't have a capacity issue, and focusing on freighters would actually worsen the economic picture for the space that's available, because it would tank the rates, from my previous comments. So we don't actually need freighters to grow. We just need to sell what we have. We have significant local demand in the target industries that we want to specialize in. So we have the specialty cargo. We have limited space on the airport to process it, though. So there's an opportunity for us to improve there and capture that business. We do have integrators present at the airport, and neither one of them recognize the airport as a hub. So that's another growth opportunity. And then this slide talks about the presence of an e-commerce player. That's brought up just because of the total global driver. See that, this couple of slides earlier of where a lot of that demand is coming from. And given that we have a pretty heavy presence of e-commerce players in Virginia, it's a point of consideration of like, do we want to lean into being sort of an e-commerce gateway at Dulles? It's not a must, but it is one of the things that has made other cargo airports have that sort of diversity of cargo that creates that virtuous cycle when you hit that tipping point of enough cargo types that fill the majority of the belly of your flights, and then that causes the airlines to upgrade the asset. So you may actually suddenly have a larger wide body aircraft, even though you don't need to sell any more tickets because you need to accommodate the additional cargo, which then leads to more passenger sales. So both sides of the airport win. And then eventually you end up with a situation where you've got so much cargo on that lane that you need to run a freighter. And the e-commerce piece can certainly help accelerate that. So that's a point of consideration that we'll evaluate going forward. It is public knowledge that United is the largest airline that operates at Dulles, and that they have made tremendous investments in e-concourse. They're building out their own passenger terminal. The way United operates their network, they don't run freighters. All their cargo moves through the belly. United's one of the largest trading partners with most of our destinations that we highlighted in the previous slides. And again, that's all publicly available information. But what we concluded from that was like, so wait a second, you're making Dulles a hub, you're investing and growing in Dulles, and you move cargo through your network, through your hubs to ultimately serve the end users at the final destination for that cargo. So that means if we don't actually sell any more cargo through Dulles, we're still going to grow cargo tonnage through Dulles just by virtue of the way how United runs their operation, which means we need room to process that additional cargo growth, which again is a great situation to be in, because kind of to oversimplify this without even trying, we are going to grow naturally based on the other market factors that are pushing cargo through Dulles. So we have the opportunity to really lean into that and you know, take the lead and establish ourselves as a global recognized cargo gateway. And it can start here. So I keep talking about this space and the ability to process cargo. So I've addressed the fact that one problem we don't have is space to sell. We have that. We have abundant belly capacity. But the cargo structures at the airport are legacy. Some of it's actually historically protected from when they were originally built. And not all of the cargo facilities on terminal are being used to process cargo. And the spaces that are largely being used to process cargo are full. And there's considerations of like putting awnings off of those buildings to put packed ULDs out on the taxiway to make room for additional cargo processing. So we've got kind of this interesting chicken egg situation where we've got space to sell, but we can't kind of really get it processed through the airport in an efficient manner to get it on the plane. So can we really grow? And the answer is we need to address short term, buy us some breathing room to protect the cargo we have, give ourselves some room to grow while we make investments in the world-class facilities to address the pharmaceutical needs, the temperature control needs, and frankly, world-class processing facilities to realize, basically doubling cargo throughput through the airport over the next 10 years. All doable, but it kind of starts with giving us some room to maneuver over the next like 2 years while we lean into larger scale developments. I think it's pretty widely understood that as part of the master plan, the south end of the airport is kind of the future destination of cargo. But the question is kind of what unlocks that, right? And how do we kind of kick the snowball down the hill and help it grow? And the answer is pretty simple. It's one of the large cargo operators today, all of whom I have had conversations with the most senior level who are willing to invest long term. So it's a matter of just kind of who goes first and the timing of that, and aligning that up also with the business picture of like, okay, are we really going to grow quickly enough that we should probably start this development sooner rather than later? And so this is currently planned and zoned for, but the timing is an open question, right? When does that start? And so through this study and some other confidential information, we understand more clearly the timing of that. And the opportunity to progress sooner rather than later exists. And so part of the recommendation from the study is to engage the parties in the correct order and at the correct level to validate and align on the business case to then move that opportunity forward. And just to emphasize again, even with just the investments that United has publicly made, we're going to run into a challenge from a cargo processing perspective. There's an opportunity to really accelerate growth and basically more than double tonnage through the airport over the next 10 years. But we have to make investments on the facility in order to realize any of that growth, because it has nowhere to go. If we optimize, which is a combination of 100% cargo use only dedication in the existing cargo space, and then reconfiguring it a little bit and making modest investments to use the space as it exists today more efficiently, we can buy ourselves the time that we need to do longer term developments in the South End. And if we don't, we're kind of stuck. So it's a little bit of a traffic jam. Like we need to commit to this and then rock and roll. So to realize this, the recommendations are essentially we have a cargo focused community around the airport, but it's gone somewhat dormant. So we need to reinvigorate that and commit to cargo with a team, whether that rests in the economic development side or through the airport or a combination thereof. A team focused on cargo, sell what we have first, prioritize serving the core sectors that require that specialty that will set us apart from a service level perspective, and also unlock the biggest economic development opportunities within the Commonwealth. And coincidentally, all of that will also help unlock the planned development in the South End. And doing all of that will then essentially create a virtuous cycle where it will eventually sustain itself. And business gets business, so to speak. But we need to get to that tipping point. So short-term investments and global awareness of the capabilities are essential. And then certainly we have the resources to explore the relevant federal, state, and local grants that will help drive the investments needed. No one entity needs to shoulder this. It's not like it's got to go in MWA's budget or it's not going to work kind of thing. It's actually quite the opposite. This is a team effort, and I think there's a pretty clear path for that. And then the long range timeline basically looks like this. It's commit, get the team, sort of shore up the operations, get some quick short-term wins to get some cargo momentum and global awareness so that forwarders and shippers and airlines all collectively use the airport. That will demonstrate that the market capture opportunity that we know exists truly is there, which proves out on paper the economic models to justify further investments, which can happen as early as like 26, 27, if the business case is there and commitments happen and all that kind of thing. And then from there, it's maintain that status quo, push the development, and ultimately elevate Dulles to where we then become the established global leader and recognized. I would like to see us recognized as the leading air cargo gateway in the US. So that's kind of the rosy optimistic vision, but that's the goal. That's what we're shooting for. And that, I think, is my last slide.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. That's not setting the bar too high. Leading air cargo for the entire United States. Is that the world or the US? That we can start with the US and then we'll build into the world?
That's it. And if you talk to the global cargo community, that bar is exceptionally low, right? Like we're the largest market, so the rest of the world does business with us because they have to. It's in their economic best interest. But from an air cargo perspective, it's not pleasant to operate here. The global standards are in Europe and in Asia. So they will tell you that we're kind of in the Stone Ages as an industry. So we have an opportunity to be the first from a quality perspective in the US, rather than letting that reputation go to the legacy guys in Atlanta, Chicago, or New York. So
yeah, I'm excited about it. I know you put a lot of thought and you certainly buy right into your enthusiasm, but it's facts. I mean, it's data driven. Mm-hmm. It's not just a feel good trying to sell us something. That's why I like the data. The one that does concern me is that 2-hour and 4-hour concentric circle. And one of the questions, the comments mentions about the road network. We've got folks on the north side. When you start thinking about Maryland, Pennsylvania, they're not going to be real excited about making 15 any easier or extending 28 north for Potomac Crossing, right? They've been fighting this. There's offense and defense. But I think that's kind of where we need to go, right? We start reaching out, trying to do that. We got to be realistic about, hey, there's opportunities here at the airport, and either you stay there and you fix the road network so we can get better transportation, or move to Virginia.
That addresses the specific Virginia, Maryland pharmaceutical cluster sort of situation. So yes, and also from a total cargo service network perspective, the opportunity is different than passenger, and some unlikely service origin and destinations could be the genesis of a lot of our growth in like the Ohio Valley. There's a significant opportunity to relieve pressure from Chicago, not just JFK, and deliver a higher quality of service, particularly on the lanes where we're the best connected, right? So to all of Europe, to the Middle East and Africa, we have actually a better service product than those other airports when you look at like total continuity of service. So we can sell into the markets that are more heavily congested, that regularly experience backlogs and truck queuing and all of that, and develop a better product in the short term and build it out from there. So it's not just Northern Virginia, Maryland, right? It's a much bigger opportunity, and that also supports the industries that we're focused on growing, right? There's supplier network and customer network that is far beyond Virginia. One of the standards for the state to even get involved in an economic development project is that the project that locates in Virginia makes 51% of its money outside of Virginia, is what we refer to as traded sector. So we're already facilitating interstate commerce and international commerce. So having a larger service area to drive freight through the airport ties right into that vision as well.
Boy, just having experienced New York, JFK in particular, Chicago, as we enter the winter months, there aren't two worse places to be, whether you're talking about ground transportation or actually flights out of there with a little bit of weather. I was shocked to see that those are the hubs and what they're relying on. And it's got to be 12 months a year. That it can't be seasonal cargo. You got to be able to go all the time.
Yes, correct. And also, I mean, the history of the cargo at those airports, because those airports don't have a team either focused on cargo. But you can go all the way back to sort of the history of Chicago and the industrial center of the United States from New York to then out to Pennsylvania and Newark, New Jersey, and then eventually the Rust Belt, and Chicago committing to being that industrial connectivity way back in the 1800s, right? And the rail infrastructure. And so that's the legacy sort of established distribution node in the country. And so that's where the cargo went, because that's where the industry was. And so that's kind of always been there. And it's, the entire time I've operated in this industry, I'm used to regularly seeing backlog reports for Chicago and JFK for cargo. That's just like normal. It's standard. What's the backlog today? Is it 3 days, 5 days, 7 days? For temp controlled pharma, it's like, do you want to see a backlog report at all? Like, no. So there's plenty of opportunity there, right? I mean, that's just sort of, editorialized comments, but
It made me think of the other thing is, Keith and I were up in Plattsburgh. They had a rail yard. They had, you're able to bring train cars right onto the base, had a simulator. Great rail transportation in those other airports. Is that going to hurt us? Is that a concern? How does that fold into your thinking?
No, I mean, rail is all about scale and big and heavy and ugly. So that really doesn't have anything to do with global air cargo, particularly belly cargo. Where rail would be of value is for project cargo that would go on a big freighter. I mean, think in terms of like the Antonov and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
At project oriented cargo. And that's very niche and that's very specific, and that's just not something that we need to worry about.
And that's the ports, right? I mean, so that's part of where you spend a lot of time worrying, thinking about that. So they got that covered. We can run the trucks up and down 81 and 95. Plenty of alternatives how to get up and back. Hey Tim, does that answer your question about going up 28 and expanding the road network?
Sure. I'm just curious if there was any update on that ever happening, if anybody knows.
The update is it won't ever happen if you're Maryland, and Virginia will keep fighting for it. That's the update.
Status quo.
Status quo.
Yeah. Well, in terms of, I mean, that's the important piece. Why we've got some, we kind of reorganized a little bit where we've got transportation, economic development to take constant look at it. We've got some folks that we're working, but Keith has always been pushing about the Potomac crossing, and I think what I heard, Scott, was there are a lot of other priorities right now, and nice idea, but in terms of Virginia, it's not even worth the fight because we've got until we get that American Legion going. I mean, the federal level, they feel like they got to get something done with the American Legion before they even start talking about another Potomac crossing, which is a real concern. I mean, you see what happened with the construction in Tyson's. It's just, unbearable on what was trying to get through that area just with the construction process. So it's going to get worse. Keith, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. Everything we've heard from Maryland and from others is exactly that, is that the American Legion is the first project to get going. And once they get that thing grounded, then they may be able to talk about it. Maryland's got a bigger problem. When they did away with their private partnership, on fixing the Beltway and that, they don't have the cash reserves to meet the federal standards for additional federal loans for their highway program. So that's going to be another big thing they've got to do. But, historically, I mean, as long as you look at the Washington, D.C. area, Beltway started out with 2 lanes, and it's always been one state pushing the other. And whether it's building the 3rd lane across to the Potomac and then having 2 lanes on the other side that forces them to expand to 3, or in our case just now, the fast lanes going up there, and forcing Maryland to react to those, and how do they handle that extra traffic. So it's going to be, hopefully it's in my lifetime that we see it. It's been drawn out and can be done, and preserving the agricultural belt that they want to. And hopefully they'll see the economic need for it and finally put it in. But the other angle I was going to say is it's also been attacked from a national security standpoint too, that if you had to, evacuate Washington or do something like that on short notice, the road system is wholly inadequate to handle that. So that's another avenue to get another approach to it to help out. But, as Scott said, you said, Tim, I mean, it's going to be time.
Yeah, Keith, and I'm looking at Scott, who fought the good fight for the Silver Line, and we had over 2 million passengers go through the airport metro station. What? I mean, how did you not think that was going to be a great idea, and all the potential and how it's being used? So I think, again, that's why we've got Committee for Dulles to be advocates for the airport, to be thinking forward about it, and really excited about having Eric in here, because it's a regional solution. Obviously, Dulles has been a regional partner for a lot, but we also are a great Commonwealth partner. And when you start talking in the power of VEDP to looking at the whole problem set and potential, I just think VEDP is right on the money. It's the opportunity. And so, Eric, one of the things that I'd kind of mentioned to you is, how can we help? Because I see all the time with the Port of Virginia, where they put in for grants and tax credits for some of the different partners down there. What are things we could or should be asking for to our legislators to make sure this is higher on their list as they start getting ready for session next year and the out years, right? This isn't a one and done. We need to educate them, make sure, and I know there are a few folks that popped in and out. I think Kevin, the new mayor from Herndon, was on. And so we've got folks that understand it, but we need to do a better job at our Commonwealth and our federal members, so they start being conversant in this cargo discussion. Eric?
Yeah, so I think to boil it down, the Port of Virginia's got a pretty decent model in terms of grant programs and volume incentives. They historically have done it like by container. So we don't have anything that incentivizes air cargo tonnage through the Commonwealth, and we don't really have anything that's cargo focused. Everything that's out there in the Department of Aviation, as well as like the FAA, it's all focused more on aeronautical use and the airport infrastructure itself. And so you could probably extend that to a cargo building if you parked a plane at it, but anything beyond that, then there really isn't a mechanism beyond what exists in the economic development space. So a cargo specific incentive that mirrors that structure for the Port of Virginia that's proportionate for air cargo would make sense.
Great, thank you. And anybody else have any questions for for Eric or Scott?
Eric, on Mike White here, just a question. One of the issues, and this guy named Mr. Potter, who's very familiar with the U.S. Postal Service, Dulles is not an international postal gateway, and a lot of e-commerce product is coming via mail, China Post in particular. And Kennedy is saturated to the extent they can't handle it. Has there been, would it be possible you think that Dulles should be approaching the Postal Service to make Dulles an international gateway for mail?
That was actually one of the recommendations in the study, was to seriously consider the mail and consider committing to the next RFI process for that. So in short, yes.
Okay.
That's awesome. Yeah, when I saw the integrators and you had UPS and FedEx, I was like, oh, U.S. Postal Service. I'd even maybe they can use the Silver Line to move stuff into DC and not have to put it on trucks. And they really have not been. They have been innovative on their logistics, but I think there's still some things we could do and kind of suggest to them. So that's a great idea, Mike. I appreciate that. Anybody else? I can't see all the hands. Feel free to jump in and just unmute yourself.
I have a quick question, Eric. It's Brandon from Loudon Economic Development. As we're moving into a business traction strategy for getting some of these larger integrators and cargo movers, as well as those, expediters and things like that, what kind of partnership or resources, or do you have any potential ideas on what support to be looking for from, Loudoun, Fairfax County for supporting this initiative moving forward?
Are you talking in terms of like awareness and promotion, or in terms of like site availability for supporting industry?
Yes to both.
Yes to both. So we can do quite a bit with with like a team of two in terms of promoting in the cargo community directly for the entities that would be making cargo routing decisions. And my ask will be for at the state level to support that. But in terms of local, I mean, there's a couple of entities that operate in Loudoun and Fairfax today that are that participated in the conversation and are, I know for a fact, are eager to grow in the area. And I think that the market segment is large enough that a little bit of competition is good for everybody. So I think there's room for additional investment there. And that's in the in the cartage space and the facilitation of the movement of cargo. And you can get a lot done with a smaller footprint. So we're not talking about like your retail distribution centers that are 500,000 square feet. Air cargo isn't supposed to sit still, right? It's time definite, it's sensitive, it's shelf life, it's all of that. So it turns quickly. You can turn your entire warehouse over every night if you've got the service infrastructure to drive it. So you can do a lot with a smaller footprint, which is good for Loudoun and Fairfax in terms of commercial site availability. Really leaning into those higher value industry focuses too, and facilities that can specialize in that material handling will help compete from a service level cost relative to cost of real estate perspective as well. So I would just say from a local planning perspective, make sure that you have a cargo strategy and a logistics growth strategy that supports what could pass through your localities that will also support the growth in the rest of the Commonwealth. And that helps everybody.
Great. Thanks, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
And then Brandon, that means that while you're going to be in charge of Committee for Dulles, you'll have a great start to your next term with kicking off cargo, because it'll overlap some of the first starts that Eric has proposed.
Absolutely. You guys have set me up for success. So I'm planning on taking credit for everything for the next 2 years.
Hey, Eric, how about on campus versus off campus? Right. So I'm thinking of temperature control storage. Sure, you'd love to drive up and drop it off. There might be some benefits to having it move short term. This isn't just one and done kind of a thing. Maybe there's some more options for growth. And how does that look for, and again, I'm thinking a little bit about the port. Everything's not right on as you get off the ship, right? You've got things just a little bit of ways. There's this whole ecosystem that you end up building out. That might be a model for us to go down and visit and talk to some of the port folks. What are your thoughts about off-campus versus on-campus opportunities?
So I would caution looking at the maritime space, because this is different. And I would say there are communities, you'll need to look globally, and they are willing to host and give us the playbook of how they did it where they are. But in the pharmaceutical space, there is a global standard, and that's where we should go. In the belly to cargo, how to grow space, there are a couple of examples. They're close enough that all of this could be done in one trip. And they are willing to host us as well. And on campus versus off, for anything temperature controlled, anything sensitive, you need both, right? It doesn't do you any good to have 120-degree tarmac and a non-temperature controlled warehouse space, and then your temperature controlled carton now needs to be repacked because the gel pack inside it is done, or the ULD has a failure on the TC instrument. You need to repack it. Are you going to repack something that's at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius on a 97-degree warehouse? No, that you're going to get a temperature excursion at that point that's going to spoil the product. So having the ability to repack the cargo in a GDP certified space on terminal is necessary in case something doesn't make a flight, or there's a failure in the packaging, or whatever. And then similarly, to facilitate the movement throughout the supply chain, especially if it's going a fair distance away, you absolutely also need that capability off campus. And, we're talking about processing imports, but also exports. And so it's the reverse, right? There's the build, consolidation, repack, QC, value added service that the 3PL space excels at, that most of the life science manufacturers and labs and everything rely on. So having that capability off campus but close makes all the sense in the world. But it doesn't do you any good to have a completely locked down supply chain everywhere but at the airport, and then have claims happening left and right at the airport because the facilities there don't mirror everything throughout the rest of the supply chain. So it's got to be complete.
Some belly cargo, belly cargo, belly cargo, right? That's, keep thinking about the belly and don't get too far ahead of ourselves with all the other options.
Oh, 100%. The belly's what we have, right? And we have it in abundance on all of the lanes. So that's what we have. That's what we sell. And the good news is all of the industries that we're focused in growing are conducive to belly space. So that's fine. But then still the freighters come, right? Because the airlines will upgrade the asset to accommodate more cargo, which then gives you the ability to sell more tickets. And so that benefits the passenger side. And then eventually you need to do a sweeper to scoop up frustrated freight that's got bumped a couple of times. And then that introduces regular freighter service on that lane. And then you go from, 1 flight a week to, 2 flights a week to daily flights and the rest. But so that virtuous cycle will take care of itself. But freighters first is not the answer. It's sell the space you got first. That aside, if there's a project, if there's something ad hoc, right, a market rollout, as long as we have the capability to process a freighter, if it just happened to show up because it needed to, that's fairly straightforward and easy with the operations that are at the airport presently. You just need to have a tariff in place to do it. That's not something to say no to, but that's not the path to growth. That's like a yes and sort of thing.
Okay. I saw the governor with the ribbon cutting for some batteries. Again, that was another thing I was thinking, opportunities. I don't know if they're
Sure.
Freighter. I mean, it just one thing after the other. It's really, really great and productive. I don't want to keep you too long. I really appreciate what you've done already, but what are your thoughts about next steps? I know you got a little road show you got to go to, talk to some other senior people. What can we expect to see as you kind of get more visibility on the results of the cargo study?
Yeah, there's conversations with key stakeholders that will enable this to move forward. So assuming that that is well received, the next steps that you should expect is an investment in a cargo team, and then regular engagement up there locally. And that's basically my immediate short-term ask of my leadership and the governor's office and the folks up at Dulles is to allow that to happen and prioritize cargo as a gateway to economic growth. So assuming that that's it, then I would say that is what I would expect in the immediate short term, and then the engagement from that team will drive all of the other incremental steps. And the community as a whole up there will have a channel to communicate through, as well as a channel to get homework assignments from, because we all got to work together to make it happen, right?
Awesome. And then Jennifer just mentioned about the job growth opportunities in the chat. What are your thoughts? How soon is that things that we can start planning for? I know VEDP's done a great job of positioning and advocating for jobs in the workforce.
Yeah, so just to answer that question in context, so that everybody understands what I said. So the VEDP's mission is economic development in the Commonwealth. So we're at the end of the day, it's capital investment and jobs. So every time you see an announcement come from the governor's office that, VEDP led project, X number of jobs, X number of CapEx in whatever locality, that's the type of thing we're after. So looking at the market as a whole, the industry sectors where we believe we're going to see most of that growth is logistics, manufacturing, and knowledge work, even though there's a list of industries that we have targeted business managers on. So that's what that is. So of all the jobs to come, whatever that is, 65% of that is from those three sectors, which is why we've made those investments. That's where we're positioned as a Commonwealth from a total ecosystem perspective to experience the biggest chunks of that growth.
Awesome. I remember coaching T-ball. You put the ball on the tee. Okay, knock it out. Not everybody hit the ball.
Right.
So there's another part of this. And I think that's part of the Committee for Dallas, to making sure you got an educated group that can respond and make sure we hit the ball off the tee. And we appreciate you setting it up for us. Eric, thank you. I appreciate it. I know this won't be the last time. Certainly, if there's anything that we can do to help facilitate as you come up and talk to folks, we'd love to host you and help you get the right people in front. But thank you so much. And Scott, I turn it back to you and kind of get us off the stage.
All right, John, thank you. And thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for attending today. Just as a reminder, we will take this recording and post it up on the YouTube channel. And also remember to please register to attend our Committee for Dulles luncheon on December 12th at the Dulles Airport Marriott with the airport manager. With that, I thank everybody and hope you have a good rest of your week. Thank you.